Welcome back to another episode of What's the Big Idea? And this, I think, is the very first episode I have ever opened. I think.
Really?
Feels that way. My producer is telling me no. I think it is. We'll go back and look. Either
now
way,
you have to watch
first-
all the
first
episodes.
time
Listen
in a
to all
while.
the episodes.
We're joined by a special guest today in Rob's chair. Children's
Yep.
pastor extraordinaire, Eric Matthew Gould.
Yep.
Glad
here
to
we
have
are.
him on the pod. So Eric preached this past Sunday, and Rob is at Impact currently. So Eric and I have the podcast this week. So Eric filled in, not so much filled in, but just took a turn preaching in the rotation, continuing in our series in Acts as we are continuing to track with Paul and Silas in Philippi. So I'll kick it off to you. I'm actually, before I do, first off, I'm proud of you because you had a big idea this week.
Thank you, man.
The last time Eric preached, we did not have a big idea.
so we almost didn't have a podcast.
There we go. We had to do things differently, but nonetheless. So what was the big idea this week?
So our big idea was a continuation of last week's big idea, but the big idea this week was when faced with forceful opposition, be bold. So, it was, when you look at the story or the event that happened, it's a continuation of what was already going on in Philippi as they were coming into the city. And so I felt like it was appropriate to play off of last week's big idea. And I know when you look at Acts, there's a lot of events that are continuations as you build off of one event. But when someone comes in, it's a little different. It helps to kind of piggyback.
Sure. So let's remind folks of the context for a minute. So Paul and Silas in Philippi, they had been doing ministry there. Paul had cast out the demon from the fortune-telling girl, and as a result, the slave owners got upset, and then they take Paul and Silas, drag them before the city magistrates. They're thrown into prison, and then that kicked off into your passage.
Correct.
So give like a 30-second recap of the storyline of the passage from this past week.
Yeah, so what we had is we saw Paul and Silas in prison in the inner chambers, and during that time they were praying, they were worshiping. There was an earthquake, chains were broken, they were free, doors were opened. They stayed, they ministered to the jailer. After that, went to the jailer's home, evangelized to the entire family, entire household came to Christ. They were put back in the prison in the early morning, late night. And then the magistrate said, "You're free to go." And they said, "No." So that is a 30-second rough synopsis of what happened.
It just struck me as you were talking. Paul had 3 chances to walk out of the prison cell, and each time he at least waited,
Yeah.
So I don't know.
It's a stubborn dude.
Yeah, there's some stubbornness there for sure. All right, so thinking through the passage, as you were preaching, there were a couple of questions that came to my mind. But even right now, I'm going to go off script for a second. The earthquake that happened.
Yeah.
Okay. Random event or miracle? Was it natural earthquake that happened, or was it this an act of God? Well, just off the top thoughts.
Off the top, it's hard to say it was a random event. Now, once again, who am I to say?
Sure.
But you have a moment where Paul and Silas are in prison. They had been worshiping and praying, depending on what you believe, I think.
What do you believe?
I'm saying God has control over the weather. He has control over the earth. God very much so can make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
There's an idea that this was something that was determined beforehand, that he caused this to happen so that we could see the patience that we need to have when we're in tough situations. Or, quite frankly, it could just be, man, the timing was wild.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's harder to believe that the timing was just so. I think it's difficult sometimes if you believe that God is who he says he is, timing like that and just saying chance,
Yeah.
it's hard to believe that, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think we back away from a text like that and say, even if we can't explain the science behind it,
Mm-hmm.
it's obvious that God is sovereign, right? So
Correct.
whether it was this, supernatural thing that just happened in that one spot, if he made an earthquake there and opened the cells, or whether this was a regional thing, I mean, it doesn't really matter, right? The point is that God is sovereign over that event, and He's the one who caused it to happen for His sovereign time, for His sovereign purposes. So, all right. So thinking about, all right. So the earthquake happens.
Mhm.
Paul and Silas singing and praising at midnight, right?
Yep.
They night owls, man. They pulled an all nighter that
Matt
night.
would not appreciate that.
I would have been asleep.
Worshiping at night. It's got to be in the
Settle
morning.
down, boys.
Got to worship in the morning.
Time to. I mean, but in all seriousness, they had been through a lot, right? They had been beaten. They had been locked in the stocks. But here they are, right? Praising and celebrating at midnight.
And I tried to emphasize that as I was preaching. Each point, I think you have to go back and emphasize, like, hey, remember what they had gone through.
Mm-hmm.
Remember how tired they are. Think about how tired you get at 10 p.m.
Right.
Like, they're beyond that. The patience and the self-control that they had to have in those wee hours of the morning, I think, are important to the story.
For sure. My my flesh tends to come out more in the wee hours of the morning.
Yes.
So I don't know. I'm good for them. I'm glad they were able to do that. So thinking through that moment though, right?
Mhm.
So God, let's just say it that way. God orchestrates this earthquake. The prison bars fling open, not just for their cell, but for everybody's. The chains fall off.
Mhm.
So this is an obvious God moment, right? He literally opens the door, right, for them. So as you were preaching Sunday, excuse me, as you were preaching, I was reminded we saw a similar story back several chapters ago where Peter is in prison and Peter is there locked up that night, and God sends an angel in to break Peter out of prison. And so as Connor shared before we started recording, he's the only person in the room who's not preached a sermon about someone breaking out of prison. So you and I can share that distinction. But I thought about the differences in those stories, and then maybe the question of why. So in Peter's case, God provides a way for him to escape. Peter escapes. Sure. In Paul's example, God provides by all means a way of escape. Paul stays.
Yeah.
What's the difference and why? Like, was Peter wrong for leaving? Was Paul wrong for staying?
Yeah, I think because I had to go through the same thing because I read it and I was like, I know this isn't the only story where this has happened. And so I looked back in Acts 12 and one of the most distinct differences is there is an angel of the Lord that appears to Peter and verbally says, it's time to go, which Peter wasn't worshiping at midnight, And
what was he doing? He was sleeping.
He was sleeping.
Right?
I will say though,
me and Peter would have been.
One thing that I found funny was when Peter was in jail, it really emphasized that the brothers and sisters were praying for Peter. Man, they weren't praying for Paul and Silas out of luck.
Little different circumstance, right? There were a few more people who knew about Peter's situation than Paul's.
But I think one of the most distinct differences is the angel of the Lord that was sent. Now, that doesn't mean that this earthquake was not God's sovereignty being shown. I think we can see God's power in the earthquake. We can see the opportunity that was given. And once again, like I said, I don't like to speculate, but I do think that had Paul and Silas left, I'm not going to say that it would have gone against the will of God, but I think they knew God had more in store. And that's not to say that there wasn't more in store for Peter. But I think when you look at the aspect of prayer and worship, just the will that God had and the plan that God had for these two missionaries were a little different. Now, that's not to say don't take advantage of doors that God opens for you. Because once again, Peter, there was an open door and he walked through it.
Yeah.
Now, with that being said, he was. As I read it, it almost felt like he was being drug out by the angel.
I mean, yeah.
Because after everything happens, it says, and then Peter came to his senses. Like,
Mhm.
it makes you wonder how much of that was Peter actually in control.
Yeah. It's almost like in a dreamlike state that he did that.
Yeah, and it says that Peter did walk out. Peter did like interact with the angel. Peter was there, but it was almost like this haze that he was in. Like you said, almost like a dreamlike state.
Mhm.
And so that's one major difference.
Yeah.
Is Peter was almost drug out of prison, whereas Paul and Silas were given an opportunity, but I think they took advantage of it. And I think we also have to look at the very end. At the very end of Paul and Silas's moment, they were still seeking justice. Maybe they had that in mind from the very beginning. They knew that they were inappropriately prisoned. They were uncondemned. I have no words. Small vocabulary here. They were uncondemned. And so because of that, though, they knew that they wanted justice, and they weren't going to get justice by just leaving. And not only that, but then the jailer was going to die, and we see that happen with Peter as well. Peter gets drug out, and a lot of people died because of that.
The jailers died in Peter's example, which to me heightens the question of, which one's right.
Yeah. Well, and I, if you say that Peter is in the wrong, that's an angel of the Lord that you're saying, did God really send you? But so I think you have to look at it and you go, in both of these situations, they're right. The difference is the situation as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Peter and Silas are seeking justice, where Peter is literally in the hands of God being pulled out. So
I think you mentioned something a moment ago that is really important. Each situation is unique.
Mm-hmm.
The thing to me that is the most defining difference in those situations is the context of their imprisonment. They're both imprisoned. They're both imprisoned for following Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
But Peter, he's imprisoned for the purpose of holding him until the morning when he's going to be executed.
Yeah.
Paul and Silas were imprisoned for the night as punishment for stirring up the city.
Yeah.
But there's no indication that they were going to be. Think about it. The next morning, the magistrates show up. They weren't coming to execute.
Yeah.
They were coming to, all right, you've stayed in the jail cell 24 hours. Don't cause any more trouble. Get out of here.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that probably has something to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
God wasn't done with Peter's ministry yet. He still had a purpose for him. Obviously, we see his letters in Scripture. So, hey, we've got to have this. We got to get him. Not that God was responding like things are out of control, but you know what I mean.
Sure.
Like God is working out this miracle to allow Peter to continue in ministry.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas for Paul and Silas, their ministry was in that prison cell, right? And so God puts it all together. They're in that prison cell. And even though that earthquake happens and the doors spring open, it's like Paul and Silas we know we're not supposed to go. We know that God has a purpose right here for us. And so I think that's a difference. Is it the main reason? I don't know. But it highlights a question that I think a lot of people ask. And you mentioned this on Sunday. If God opens up the door, right, to use the phrase here, it's literal, but in our circumstances, how do we know if God opens up this door for us to walk through, or if he opens up this door as a test, right?
Yeah.
So that we won't walk through it. Mm-hmm. Thoughts on that?
I think one thing I also tried to emphasize in the sermon is we notice Paul and Silas in prayer before the event happens. Because they were in prayer and in worship before the open door happened, they knew what to do. And I think in our lives, it's the same way. If we're expectant of God to do something, but we're not praying and worshiping, we'll miss the opportunity. Mm. And so for us, it's important for us to remain in continuous prayer, in constant prayer and in worship. That way, we can be expectant of what God is going to do. And when that opportunity comes, then we'll know, oh, this is an open door for us to walk through. Yeah. Or this is an open door for us to hold back and minister in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it goes back to so much of we've talked a lot. I know you haven't been involved in the conversations, but Rob and I on the podcast a lot in Acts because we're following the Spirit, right? How do we know what God's will is for us in this moment? And the simple answer is if you walk with the Lord, you'll know. You know, I think in that moment we don't see the word in the scriptures, but it's like Paul and Silas had a very clear conviction from God. Hey, we don't need to go anywhere. Neither does anybody else in this prison. We need to stay right here because God has something He's about to do. Yeah. Whereas in Peter's case, the doors are opened and we've got 5 minutes. We got to get out of here. You know, we know that or Peter was in dreamlike state, right? But it was very clear. This is a jailbreak so that you won't be executed the next morning. So I think in our standpoint, it's got to be walk with the Lord and trust the leadership of the Spirit. You know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, there were people looking at Paul in that moment saying, the door's wide open. What are you doing? Like, get out of here. And there are going to be people for us sometimes when the door seems to be open for a decision or an opportunity where we may say, you know what, that makes a lot of sense, but I know that's not what God's calling me to do. Yeah. And so I think we just have to, at the end of the day, rest in what the Spirit guides us, guides us to do in those moments. So next time you find yourself in prison, don't run through the door automatically if it opens up. Pray about it first, right?
Pray about it. You should be in prayer before you go to jail.
That's right. Well, let's move on to kind of the next phase of the story. So earthquake, prison doors fly open, Paul and Silas stay. Yep. And the jailer shows up, and it's kind of like you get the picture. He's coming in from outside, and he can't see anybody on the inside. He just sees the door open, and he makes this assumption, oh, man, like everybody's gone. Yep. And he's about to take his own life, which, Roman law, the jailer or the person who's in charge of the prison would have to bear the punishment of those who were in there. It would have been an honor thing for him. I'm either going to get killed or I can take my own life now. Yes. Not justifying him, but that was the custom. And so as he's about to do that, Paul and Silas, hey, we're all here. Stop. Don't do what you're about to do. And then comes this question, right? It's what must I do to be saved? And the jailer and his family, they come to faith in Christ. So you taught some on Sunday about how we respond to salvation. And you made a point. You said that you talked about, like, Sunday morning, you referenced baptisms and we clap and then we move on. You talked about this idea of doing a better job of celebrating when someone comes to faith in Christ. Elaborate on that a little bit and maybe talk a little further about what do you think may be an appropriate way or a better way for us to would be for us to respond when someone comes to faith in Jesus.
Yeah, well, and realistically, each family does it differently, and some families may do an excellent job at this. But I think personally, I don't do as good as I don't do as well as I can, and part of that is, one, as a children's minister, I'm involved with a lot of kids' lives, and so when there is a kid that comes to faith, am I regularly reaching out to the family? Not just leading up to baptism, but also after they get baptized. Hey, what are y'all doing? How are y'all reading? And not just that, but like, let me take you guys out to lunch. Like the bare minimum, let me celebrate you and this salvation by taking you out to lunch. And that's one thing that I like personally, I know I can do a better job at.
Yeah.
But then, I think of some smaller churches where someone gets baptized and there's immediately like, hey, we're going to have a potluck. We know they're getting baptized this day. Everybody come. Let's celebrate this family. Honestly, I feel like that's appropriate.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that we have to do that. It's a big church. There's a lot of people. I get it. But there are a lot of ways that I know personally I can do a better job at celebrating a family. We look at, like I mentioned, birthdays. Like, some people love birthdays. I'm not a birthday guy. Surprise.
Fine. I won't write you a birthday card this year.
That's all right.
Save that postage.
I will say half the time I forget it's my birthday. I go, it's that time of the year, isn't it? And maybe Riley hates it. I don't know, but I like birthdays. To me, I've never been a huge birthday person. Even people celebrating me, I go, yeah, whatever. But weddings. We go all out for weddings. I think of baby showers. Like, people have 3-4 baby showers, and it's good. This is a good thing. I think it's important for us to celebrate these things because we're supporting and encouraging big life changes. These are changes that are going to impact someone's life forever. It's important that we celebrate those things.
Yeah.
This is not our life that we're celebrating. This is our eternity that we should be celebrating. I mean, this goes beyond a kid. This goes beyond a marriage. Like this is eternal implications.
Yeah.
And we'll clap for 15 minutes and move on. And that was convicting to me. Because I just know, man, I need to be better. I need to be more excited. And I'm not saying that when you see someone get baptized, it gets old. Because I don't think that happens, but I think you go in the context of church, people should be getting baptized. And we should be seeing people come to faith.
Yeah.
And if we're doing our job, and if as the Lord works, that is something that we see. And so it's easy for us sometimes to just go, yes, this is what should be happening. And we look at it as a whole and not as an individual. Where we go, this one individual person is now going from death to life.
Yeah.
This is eternal implications. This is huge. And we want to celebrate this with you. We want to take you to lunch. We want to give you these resources. We want to give you these gifts so that going forward, you're better prepared for whatever's coming. Because that's what we do for birthdays. That's what we do for baby showers. That's what we do for wedding showers. Here's something that you can get that's going to help you for the future. And I think we should do that with baptisms as well. And I do try and I give families books whenever they come and they're ready to get baptized. Hey, you're a Christian. Now what do we do? It's a good book to have, especially the first 6 to 8 weeks after baptism. But I mean, just bare minimum.
Yeah. I think as you're talking about that, there's a phrase that comes to my mind, and that's, I think one of the best ways we can celebrate people coming to faith in Christ is not just in that moment, but it's helping them to take the next step. Discipleship is celebration,
For
right?
sure.
It shouldn't just be a, hey, really cool, congratulations, see ya. It's got to be a connecting point for the jailer. Let's get back to our text. The jailer gets saved. What's the next step? Hey, let's share with the family, right? The family hears the gospel. And we don't see it in these verses enumerated necessarily, but I cannot imagine. Well, what's the very last verse you talked about in the text? Paul and Silas, they go back to Lydia, right?
Yep.
They visit the brothers and encourage the church. You have to think, again, it's not said specifically.
Yep.
There's no way they left Philippi without making sure that jailer and his family connected with the body of Christ there, right? Had to happen. And I think for us, when we think about celebration, when someone comes to faith, it's how do we help them to take that next step and get connected to the body and move forward? Because you can give gifts and clap and celebrate
For
all
sure.
you want, right? But if we're not helping them take the next step, do we really care?
For sure.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because this very much applies to what we're talking about on Wednesday nights. So for anybody listening, and when I say real time, I mean like this week in this time frame, we're actually in the middle of our multi-generational Bible study on Wednesday nights and looking at the lost sheep last week, this week, the lost coin. And you see that, lost son next week, you'll see the same theme. There's this rejoicing and celebration when the lost one is found, right?
Yeah.
So I thought it was interesting that you tied that in.
I had it in my notes, and in the moment,
failure.
So, in both services, nonetheless.
Well, check on the big idea.
Yeah.
Thumbs down on.
Didn't read my notes.
Let's move forward one more step in the story. So the jailer and his family come to faith. There's a celebration there with Paul and Silas. Paul and Silas go back to the prison cell, right? The next morning, the magistrates show up, or the officials, right? Show up. Hey, time to go home. Let him go. And Paul invokes his Roman citizenship right and says, "No, we're staying here. We're Roman citizens. You did this the wrong way. If you want us to leave, we're not doing this in secret. You come yourselves and open these doors, and then we'll call it even,
Mhm.
essentially. I'm obviously paraphrasing, right?
Yeah.
Um, so you used that to highlight this idea that Paul and Silas were bold in justice,
Mhm.
which is, you and I had this conversation before you preached on
Yeah.
how this ties into the text. So let's talk about that a little bit. Because you could read that statement. In all honesty,
Mhm.
you take this passage out of context.
Yeah.
Hit my mic there. You take this passage out of context, and it would
Mhm.
be very easy to walk away saying Paul was kind of a jerk. Like he's like rubbing it in their faces, and
Mhm.
shouldn't he have just gone on and not made a big deal of it? Wouldn't that have been the more humble thing to do? That was one of your other points.
Yeah.
Um, so let's talk about that. How can we seek justice
Mhm.
without being mean spirited about it? How can we do it without making a show of it or seeking vengeance?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we see Paul do is talk directly to people. It was directly to the official, directly to the magistrate, directly to whoever he was interacting with, and at no point do we see him go beyond the issue.
Yeah,
Um,
he didn't make a Facebook post about it.
yeah, he didn't, and I think it's easy when you're seeking vengeance to do it for personal gain,
Mm-hmm.
but when you're seeking justice, it's for the betterment of everybody.
Yeah,
And you're seeking righteousness when you're seeking justice too. You're seeking to do what's right, and when you're seeking vengeance, there's typically this idea of ill will.
yeah,
Um, and so what Paul did is he went directly to the people. And yeah, I mean, it's easy for us to look at it and go, he was mean, but that's just because there's conflict.
yeah,
And anytime there's conflict, it's easy to be like, and feel weird about it and not want to deal with it. But conflict is one, it's a part of life. You
yeah.
have to deal with conflict. And two, like when you are healthy with dealing with conflict, it makes the situation as a whole better. And I don't always do a great job of that because I hate conflict. So I probably would have been, I probably would have been the guy, honestly, that when the earthquake happened,
Yeah.
I catch me later.
See ya.
Um, but in that moment, I mean, the magistrates came and, like you said, go in peace. Like there's not, you know, this is just what we do. Go in peace, and that's when you see Paul kind of go, "No, we're Roman citizens,"
Yeah.
and what it does ultimately is it betters the system. Um,
The Roman system, like the
yes,
government law.
like it reminds the magistrates, oh yeah, I should probably do my job, follow the protocol, you
Yeah.
know. So I think that's one of the big things when you talk about seeking justice is it's not just for personal gain, but it's for the betterment of everything. It's for righteousness' sake.
So let me follow that up with another question. And this one
Mhm.
may even be a harder question.
So you may have to answer it yourself.
So is there ever a phrase that I would use for Paul right there is
Mhm.
Paul was standing up for his rights.
For sure.
You know what I mean? Like he had a right as a
Mhm.
Roman citizen to a trial, right? The Roman system of law,
Mhm.
it was unique in the world at that time. We take it for granted in our culture today,
Yeah.
but it was very unique to the Roman Empire. That Roman citizens, had to stand before a trial before they could be convicted. They
Mhm.
couldn't be beaten prior to that trial, so forth and so on. So Paul was standing up for his rights as a Roman citizen, right? Is there ever a time where it is wrong for us to stand up for our rights? I know I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, my first thought is no. I think it's fair to stand up for your rights. I think how you go about it is important because once again, if you go about it in this way of like they're awful people
Right,
because they're just mean and they hate everybody that's doing this. Hold on. Like let's address the situation.
right,
Is this something that happens across the board or is it just this? And even then it's irrelevant because
right.
ultimately how we're dealing with it is really the core issue. Now, not saying that's the difference between vengeance and justice is how we deal with it, but I think when you go at it from seeking vengeance, you're going to go at it with a more negative connotation. I think when you're invoking your right, one, you have to know you have the right, because there's some places you don't have the right to say certain things. Like, I can't go to certain countries and just say whatever I want and then claim my human rights. Like,
Yeah.
no, you may not have that there. And so that's another thing, is Paul was aware of his rights. And so I don't think it's wrong for you to ever ask for your rights. But I think how you go about asking for your rights is what's really important. Unless there was a certain situation that you were thinking about where you go, I think in this situation, you should just kind of be quiet.
I think, again, it's one of those things. Number one, temperament and personality kind of come into this, right? Some people are more confrontational than others. I would say to the person who's more docile, you might need to be more bold, right? In standing up for what is right. I would urge the person though who is more, hammer who sees the nail and wants to hit everything, hey, there may be a time where defending yourself might end up backfiring more than it does help, and I think you just have to be wise and check your motives there. Again, when you read these verses, I don't see I don't see it necessarily being like Paul's trying to just make a show of something or one up.
For sure.
I do think he's insisting that he be treated fairly as a Roman citizen. I think that's it. And I think, put it in our context as Americans, right? We're blessed to have the freedoms that we have, the laws that we have, the system of justice that we have, even with its flaws. It's such a better system than so many people in the world have, right? And with that, we have laws, freedom of speech and rights and things like that, that we have as, not just as Christians, but as American citizens, right? And so in a case of persecution, I don't think we have to forfeit those rights. How many court cases do you see where a Christian's freedom of speech has been infringed upon, and so it goes to court, and that is perfectly acceptable for us to stand up for those rights that we have as American citizens. At the end of the day, though, my caution would be, but before we're American citizens, we are children of the kingdom of God, right?
Of course.
And that the number one goal of ours should be, does this honor and glorify the Lord? And even as we are fighting for our rights, right?
Yeah.
To make sure that we're doing so in a way that continues to honor and glorify Jesus, not in some bombastic or self-centered way. So it can be a delicate thing.
For sure.
And I think, again, it goes back to what we talked about in the beginning of, from a spiritual standpoint, what do we do? Even Jesus, Jesus didn't stand up for, like, this is unjust and, he was silent before his accusers. There may be a time where you just have to turn that other cheek and you walk away and surrender. Even Paul says that in his letter to the Corinthians, that, particularly in the context of believers, he says it's better to be wronged, right, as a believer than to make a debacle in front of all these other people that brings shame upon the name of Jesus. Again, that's a paraphrase, but in the case of us as believers who may have our rights infringed upon, particularly by the government or society, I do think that it's perfectly acceptable, not just spiritually and morally, but even just, ethically for us to stand up for those things that are right.
I think when you get into that territory, though, of being aggressive with your rights and being bombastic with, like, I'm going to attack this and I think that's where you get into vengeance territory.
Yeah.
And I don't think you're seeking righteousness. I don't think you're seeking justice. I think you're seeking vengeance.
Yeah.
And I think that's the line, is how are you going into this?
Right.
Are you going into it to make them look bad, or are you going into it to see the right thing happen?
Yeah.
And honestly, I think too, the people that would be the judging you, or those that have brought you in for whatever reason it is that your rights are now being, where you now need to invoke your rights, like, I think they can tell whether you're coming at it for vengeance or for justice.
I think you got to keep in mind too, what is the purpose of law and government? Number one, we got to remember where it comes from. It comes from God. Government is a gift of God to humanity for organization and structure. The law, God gave the law to his people in the Old Testament, not as a bunch of do this or I'll strike you, but it's for your good. I'm giving you these boundaries. And I think God gives us as human beings not just the right. I mean, our founders called it inalienable rights,
Yeah.
right? Like they're given to us by our Creator. But we also have these rights, not just of freedom, but we also have the responsibility, I think, to push our governing leaders to do the
Yeah.
right thing. And
Mhm.
that's what Paul's doing in that moment. So like if we see our system of government going sideways or promoting things that aren't right or operating in a corrupt manner,
Mhm.
it is good for us to call them out, not
Yeah.
in a shameful way or
Yeah.
belittling way, but in a, hey, no, do what you have been assigned by God to do,
Mhm.
which is to promote righteousness. That's what Romans says, right? The government is in place; he bears the sword, right?
Mhm.
To reward those who are righteous and to punish those who are wicked.
Mhm.
And when the government does the opposite of that, we are right in calling that out,
Yeah.
and saying, no, that's not the right thing to do,
Mhm.
and because God hasn't instituted that. So
Yeah.
it can lead into a really lengthy discussion about ethics and law and government and all that sorts of thing. But I thought it was a really good point that you made Sunday about how we are called to be bold in pursuing justice, but we
Mhm.
got to do it the right way.
Yeah.
Would be the only caution I would throw
Mhm.
out there. Anything else from the text that you want to share with the masses on the interweb?
I don't think so. There were a lot of interesting things that came from the passage where I look at it and I go, that's unique. I like that. But I mean, nothing that I was like, this needs to be said, and I just missed it.
No.
So
You had your chance.
I did.
Yeah.
I did.
So we'll see you in 6 months. The next time you
See you next year Sunday.
No, I do appreciate you stepping in and preaching that passage. We'll continue on. So, kind of where do we go from here? Turn the page to Acts 17 this week. Paul and Silas don't stick around in Philippi, and they hit the road and they head down to Thessalonica. So that's our next stop on the journey, and we'll go there and see another case of injustice that happens in Paul's ministry, or as he's a victim, I guess, of injustice. But that's where we're heading this week. But want to thank those who have tuned in and listened this week or watched this week. Hope you will continue to stay with us. If you're catching this soon enough, we mentioned Wednesday night multi-generational Bible study. That's going to go on for the next few weeks. And then we can't miss the opportunity to promote VBS. So
course.
anything you want to say about VBS before we sign off?
If you haven't signed up, now's your chance. Last full week of June, starting Father's Day. Be there, be square.
Okay. firstmoultrie.org/VBS is the website. We're free to sign up. So get all the details there. Well, thanks for taking time today. Thanks to our producer running the mics for us today. And we hope you'll tune in next time. See you then.